Ladies and gentlemen, please turn your attention to the screen. The program is about to begin.
In 2012, the world set a goal to reach zero hunger by 2030. We saw a roadmap to end hunger for everyone, for good. And then,
COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic.
the world has changed, and so has the hunger crisis.
The relentlessness of the Yemen war has made mere survival more and more difficult.
We've tried to keep up, but every year the numbers get worse. If current rates continue, we will reach 2030 with more people going hungry than at any time in the past 3 decades. The way we have fought hunger in the past won't be enough to fight hunger of the future. It is time to rethink our strategy. From the most remote communities of South Sudan to the bustling cities of India, no one can end this crisis alone. We are practitioners, advocates, policymakers, donors, and the next generation of leaders. Together, we have the expertise. Together, we have the drive. Together, we can make bold partnerships, new connections, and new ways of working that support collective problem solving and learning. Fearless self-criticism will lay a foundation for this transformation. Success will come from building on our collective strengths. We can achieve a world without hunger. We must achieve a world without hunger. We, together, will stand so all can thrive in a world without hunger.
Good morning. And thank you all for being here. We're here today, and we've gathered around the whole world online for one reason and only one reason only. We've come together against hunger. I want to declare from the very beginning that the fight against hunger is very personal to me. You see, I come from a place where I was not supposed to make it this far. I was not supposed to be here this morning speaking with you from this beautiful place. But I'm here. I'm here because as the son of poor farmers, I know what it is like to be hungry. I know what it is like to not know where my next meal was going to come from, let alone know when it was going to be. But I'm here. I'm here because people came together and they provided and they helped me. And so I am here today, and you need to know this, that I'm here today because to whom much has been given, much is expected. And so the fight against hunger is really very personal to me. What puzzles me and many of us in this room and around the world is that at a time like this, at a time of immense global wealth, at a time of self-driving cars, at a time when we're talking about space tourism, at a time of unimaginable technological advancement, more than 800 million people go to bed hungry every day. Unbelievable, but it is true. We need to be angry, very angry. In fact, we need to be outraged that global hunger is increasing at a time like this. And so we've gathered here this morning, and from every corner around the world, for us to be able to rethink and reboot how we fight against hunger. And the reasons are many. Acute malnutrition is the reason why many children around the world die, deaths that could have been easily prevented. Stunting is the reason why many children do not develop their cognitive skills for them to participate very well in this beautiful world. In fact, it is the reason why many children drop out of school. Stunting is the reason why the private sector across 95 low to middle income countries lose $135 billion in sales every year. Every year. Allow me to repeat. Stunting is the reason why the private sector across 95 low to middle income countries lose $135 billion in sales every year. And so you see, global hunger affects all of us because it significantly impacts the global productivity. It affects all of us. And that's the reason why we have to come together to fight against hunger. But see, we're also here because we know that hunger is preventable. Because as practitioners, we have examples to be able to show that hunger is really preventable. Go to Antioquia Valley in Ethiopia and ask them about their life today versus 1984 during the Ethiopian famine. Go to Marielle in Turkana district of Kenya and ask them the last time they were given food aid. Go to Yatta in Machakos district in Kenya and ask them about their life today versus where they were 10, 12 years ago. The question is, why are we not taking these programs to scale? So we are here today to renew that individual commitment, to strengthen and to deepen our fight against hunger. Indeed, if it is true that organizations are made up of people, if it is true that governments and corporations and foundations are made up of people, that I am talking about that individual commitment, renewed and strengthened for us to be able to fight against hunger. Because then and only then are we going to see changed organizations, changed corporations and foundations and government. And with that, even a higher sense of urgency for us to be able to fight against hunger. Imagine what is going to happen. Imagine if we had global reprioritization where zero hunger became the highest priority. Imagine what would happen. No child will ever die of hunger. And each child's God-given talent will be fully exhibited and manifested in a way that will enable them to be able to live in this world peacefully. A lot is at stake. But I say this knowing that the road ahead can be arduous. It can be very challenging. And so it is going to require ongoing commitment, but also perseverance to sail through. And so I see it today and tomorrow and the days ahead as investment in ourselves, investment in each other, investment in one another. And with that investment, even a stronger foundation from which we can leap forward to be able to fight against hunger. We are hopeful. We are hopeful because anytime we came together, we succeeded with great results. See, in the 1990s, we came together and we launched the Child Survivor Programming. And we succeeded with stunning results. In the 2000s, we came together and we fought against HIV and AIDS. At the time, HIV and AIDS was a death sentence. Research was in its infancy. Stigma was very high. We came together, and PEPFAR was born. The President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief was born. Then we had Global Fund, and we saw tremendous funding go into research. Look at where we are today with HIV and AIDS. It is going to take the same outrage and the same sense of urgency for us to come together to be able to see zero hunger in this world. It is possible, and we can do it. But I need to share this with you. The reason why we were so successful those times was because when we came together, we dropped our logos and egos at the door. And we spoke with honesty. It was genuine. It was heartfelt. And so because of that, we marched on and we saw success. We need to do the same today because zero hunger is not something that we should tolerate around this time. And so Together Against Hunger is really an invitation to pause, to reflect, to restore, and to recognize that just as we did in the 1990s with child survival, HIV and AIDS, that we can and we must and we should, because we are indeed capable. Indeed we are. And so in the next 2 days, we want to come together to be able to focus on our common values and then be able to accentuate ways to amplify those successful efforts. And so together we must, number one, speak with one voice to not lose track of our collective goals. Number two, to rethink how we collaborate in funding. And number three, work together to advocate for change. Thank you very much. Thank you. So I now have the honor of introducing the chair of Action Against Hunger Network, Mr. Ashwini, Kakkar.
Good morning. And thank you for being here. A warm welcome to each and every one of you, and to all those joining via live stream from around the world. So why are we here together? The purpose for all of us to be here today is to reimagine our work, to change the status quo, and to collectively try and eliminate hunger in a time-bound manner. I think, we can all come together in a way by bringing this whole curse to an end. Let me first start by expressing collective gratitude for all those individuals and the organizations that work together, that work so hard to get us towards a world free from hunger. Thank you for working tirelessly, purposefully, selflessly, and compassionately. All of you, all of us, we are collectively breaking down the chains of hunger and malnutrition. While at times we work a little bit together, we also work in tandem with each other, but we need to come much closer to build stronger and deeper ties so that we can collaborate and coordinate effectively. All this is a bit like the fingers of a hand. The fingers work beautifully individually, but when they come together as a fist, the impact can be multiplied manyfold. So let us all, through collective self-introspection, work towards collective action. Let us take it upon ourselves to raise the bar for others in our domain while accepting responsibility and accountability for doing more and doing it better. Having come here at the Kennedy Center, we can certainly draw inspiration from the inaugural speech of President John Fitzgerald Kennedy, who said to others, "Can we forge against the enemy? a global alliance, north and south, east and west, which can assure a much more fruitful existence for all mankind. Will you join in this collective endeavor? The faith, the devotion that we bring to this whole effort will light the world. During the last 2.5 years, COVID has taken 6.5 million lives. 600 million people were affected by the virus. And of course, trillions of dollars were expended to overcome it. In an interesting comparison, during the same period, 20 million lives were lost to hunger. More than 800 million people are still suffering from it. And I dare say, a very minuscule portion, less than 1% of what was spent annually on COVID, is being invested against hunger. Why is this? This is probably because hunger does not affect everybody equally. So this is a bit of a problem, but I'm sure we can overcome it. We have to be able to listen carefully and with intention to all those who are less fortunate. Imagine if the last person in the queue, the poorest one, were to get to eat first, and vice versa, the issue of hunger would have been resolved a long time ago. In our world that is not only ravaged by the pandemic, but also by wars, inflation, climate catastrophes, we are always being called upon to stretch. And this stretch is in all aspects of our work, whether it be fundraising, operations, logistics, research, measurement and evaluation, advocacy, disaster relief, and even in taking higher risks on the ground. It is my humble belief that this stretch can only be overcome by innovation with cooperation. Consider for a moment how computers, mobile phones, simple things, internet, have transformed our work and our outcomes. Consider also how technology and new media have changed our views of the world. But now consider how the technology giants who have made huge advancements in the fields of artificial intelligence, extended reality, big data, blockchain, 2G, satellite mapping, drone deliveries, and a slew of other areas like this, along with innovative startups, all of them, how can they become a part of our new roadmap? As stakeholders, we are certainly aware of all the challenges ahead. We are also aware of the painful consequences should our efforts fall short. So, this is the reality of the situation. However, we should all come together in hope and belief that we can get it done. Action Against Hunger may have provided a small inspiration towards the Together Against Hunger movement. But any movement is only as strong as those who join. So let us all join together and contribute our efforts actively in the work ahead. In conclusion, We have come together with great clarity of purpose to collaborate with our intellectual and physical resources and to forge collective action. All of us, we need to achieve the highest impact in eliminating endemic hunger during this decade, while addressing some of the imbalances that exist. Our world has enough food, technology, logistics, and other capabilities to overcome hunger and malnutrition forever. Purposefully rethinking and reworking this challenge with our collective will, wisdom, and work will certainly help us in achieving our goal. So let us all come together against hunger. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. So great to see so many familiar and new faces. I'm Kate Warren, Executive Vice President and Executive Editor at DevX, and really happy to be kicking off today's conversations with Roy Steiner. Probably doesn't need introduction to many of you in this room, but Senior Vice President for Food Initiative at the Rockefeller Foundation. So Roy, so nice to be able to see you in person.
Nice to see you in person as well, Kate. I think we've only done Zoom, so
yes,
great.
This is great. So today we are bringing together donors, advocates, practitioners to talk about how we can collectively come together to rethink the global food system. I don't think I need to go over these sobering statistics that we're all aware of, but we know we're in a pretty critical moment. So when you think about rethinking the global food system, what does that mean to you?
Well, it's interesting, the Rockefeller Foundation has been in the area of food and agriculture for about 108 years. So there's an incredible history of investment. And, when we took a step back about 4 years ago and tried to look at the food system as a whole, what strikes you is despite the amazing things the food system has done, and, it feeds 6-7 billion people, we've actually created a food system that has a huge problem. Diet is now the #1 risk for early mortality all over the world. The food that we're eating is literally killing us. We still have 800 million people who don't have enough food, and that's growing. And as many of you know, food systems account for 1/3 of all greenhouse gases. And so we've created a food system that is unhealthy for us as humanity and the planet. And so that's going to require a radical rethinking and a radical reprioritization. I think we have to think of this in terms of a full system approach and really reprioritize food and agriculture. It is still incredibly underinvested, and I think that's a major a problem in the way we think about food and systems. The other thing is, I think you can't keep doing the same things that we've been doing in the past. We have to be innovative. We have to re-examine assumptions. For example, one assumption we've come across is, we need much more diverse food systems. 50% of our calories come just from 3 crops. But even the way we use those 3 crops is problematic. When you take 100 kilograms of wheat and you refine it, you only have 70 kilograms of refined flour. But if you have whole wheat flour, you have 98 kilograms. So literally, just by shifting from refined to whole grain, you increase the amount of food in the world by 20 to 30%. 30 years ago, there was a reason why we had refined grain. The shelf life of whole grain was about 4 weeks, and it would go rancid. Now we have milling technology, 6 to 12 months. There is no reason So the very assumption on which we've built an entire refined grain system is no longer valid. Yet we're still stuck in a pattern. And right now we're in a process of shifting school meals, hopefully in many parts of the world, from refined to whole grain. You get 20 to 30% more food, 5 times the nutrition, and the best of all, it doesn't cost the government anything more. In fact, they save money. I mean, there are these solutions out there that are available if we, interrogate the assumptions we built our systems on.
And you talked a little bit about investment, and Rockefeller Foundation has made the largest ever investment in food and nutrition, aiming to reach 40 million underserved people over the next 3 years through your good food strategy. And I quote good food because that is an intentional term, right?
Yes.
That encompasses food that benefits health, protects the planet, and creates equitable opportunity. So could you talk a little bit about that emphasis on good food and how that trifecta is critical to how we rethink our food system, with particularly thinking about the climate impact as well?
Sure. I think good food is nourishing, regenerative, and equitable. I mean, those are the 3 characteristics that we think are really important. There's a lot of hopelessness in the world right now, and worry, and there's a good reason. We all are. We have to be realists that we're facing a very rough period in history. But I also think that there's a lot of opportunity for new vision, and there is still opportunity for hope. About 3 years ago, we noticed at the foundation that almost every book and movie about the future is dystopian. It's dark. It's Hunger Games, Mad Max, etc. We're very good at describing the world we don't want. We're actually terrible at describing the world we actually want. And so we implemented a food system vision prize. What does the world look like if we make all the right decisions? And it was amazing. We had 1,300 organizations in 119 countries submitting their vision of the future, and it was beautiful and hopeful and amazing and creative and completely diverse. Every place developed kind of different visions, but they all had underlying principles that were really important. And really some of those are these 3 characteristics of it's got to be nourishing, it's got to feed humanity in an effective way. It has to take care of the environment. It has to be equitable, it has to build communities and bring people together. And we haven't created food systems that really do that very well.
So last year, DevEx with Action Against Hunger released a report based on a survey of practitioners that are working on hunger. You were one of the people we surveyed. And so I want to quote you from that report. You say, "We have underlying forces in the world that are increasing inequity. Technical fixes can only go so far." Can you talk a little bit more about those forces and why haven't we reached that utopian vision? What is it that's going to take us to actually moving towards action and progress?
Well, I think there are, the forces at work. This is once again being able to see the whole system is critical. When we did an analysis of food systems, there's this, as many of you know, true cost accounting is now something that's coming to the fore. When you really look at the food system, you look at the value it creates. We did this for the United States, and it's being done by many organizations in multiple countries. In the U.S., McKinsey helped us with this. About $1 million, we create $1 trillion worth of value, but conservatively, we destroy $2 trillion worth of economic value, both because of disease, environmental degradation, biodiversity loss, and economic opportunity loss. So we've actually created a value-destroying system. So I think that means we're not thinking about this in the right way, from the right perspective. And in order to get the right perspective, I think we need new voices and we need new conversations. It's not one conversation, it's many conversations. I do believe that many of the indigenous perspectives are real system thinkers. Some of the winners of this Vision Prize were indigenous groups, and they've fundamentally always thought of the system and thought 7 generations in the future. And we've created a system that actually doesn't value our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren. It actually values them at zero. We've created an economic system that doesn't care about our children. Yet fundamentally, we all care more about our children than ourselves, right? I'd sacrifice anything for my children. Yet we've created an economic system that considers their lives worth nothing and not valuable. And I think there's got to be a fundamental shift in that. The other thing that I think we have to be clear-eyed on is the level of inequity and the systems of inequity. We're all aware that the rich are getting richer. Power and wealth is getting concentrated in fewer and fewer hands. And that's a problem in terms of market structure, innovation, power dynamics. And if we really want a democratic system, a food system that's just, we're going to have to deal with the concentration of power and wealth. Right now, so many of the market structures are not beneficial to consumers. We did an analysis, for example, in Africa. Everybody knows the incredible price spikes in both food and in fertilizer costs. When you break down the increase in fertilizer costs, you can only account for about 50 or 60% of it because of the Ukraine crisis or increased transport, etc. The rest is just simply price gouging. And that's because we have monopolies and oligopolies controlling those markets. And so we need more competition in the marketplace to make that really work. And we need to build those, we need to make things more fair and create more level playing fields, I believe. So those are some of the ways we have to re-envision and rethink so that we don't have the kind of hunger and deprivation that stems from a system that is fundamentally inequitable.
So I want to talk a little bit about the role of donors and philanthropies. And there's many drivers, as you mentioned: conflict, climate disruption, just inequities across the system. Yet much of the funding might focus on a single issue. And there isn't a lot of funding or programming that's looking at some of these challenges holistically. So coming from a philanthropy, how do you think about that, and what role do you think donors can play in how they fund these projects to get to some of those systemic challenges in a more holistic way?
Yeah, it's not easy to think systemically. I mean, that's the reality. It's much easier to be in a silo and go in your own lane and make things happen. And I think you still need to have parts of what you do that, because that's, the human brain can only handle so much complexity. But I do think we need increasingly to think about the food system as a system. We are part of the Global Alliance for the Future of Food, which is a group of philanthropies that get together and actually talk about these things. And I think there really is a shift from very siloed thinking to understanding it as a system and being able to collaborate. At the end of the day, no one vendor, no one philanthropy, no one organization can really make a real transformative difference. This has to be about collaboration and cooperation. And in fact, I think that's the key to so many of the world's problems. We don't have problems anymore that can be solved unilaterally. And the problem is, we have thousands of years of thinking in tribal ways. We tend to be kind of self-centered, and yet that tribal way of thinking is us-them way of thinking is actually preventing us from really creating prosperity for all of us. We're all going to suffer because we've got that narrow, short-term, self-centered, kind of materialistic way of thinking.
Yeah, and one of those drivers is climate disruption. And Rockefeller Foundation, Rashab, come out recently saying they're centering climate in all of the work that you do. Yeah. We have COP27 coming up next month in Egypt. How is this changing the way that you are thinking about tackling hunger through a climate lens? And what are you hoping to see at COP? Food is now officially on the agenda there.
Yeah, finally.
Finally.
Took a while.
So what do you hope to see come out of that?
Yeah, it's extraordinary to me that the climate conversation has taken this long to think about food systems, right? I mean, I think, with 1/3 of greenhouse gases coming from food systems and 3% of climate finance going to food systems, there's a huge mismatch. As you mentioned, Raj Shah did say that really we're becoming a climate-centered foundation, which is interesting given that the Rockefeller Foundation comes from oil and gas money, right? That is where our endowment is from. And it is just the recognition that that is the existential threat to humanity. And so everything we do now has to be connected to how we can enable the food system to actually be the solution rather than the problem. We do believe that food systems can sequester carbon. We do believe that food systems can solve the health crisis that so much of the world is facing. And that's going to take a different set of principles in the way we design. We do need to adopt more regenerative agroecological principles. The future is not extractive short-term thinking. It's just not going to work with an solo-only productivity focus. We absolutely still need productivity, but we need highly productive, regenerative, and ecological systems, ones that use biology and circular economy to really lower the greenhouse gas emissions and preserve our soil, build up the kind of resilience in our ecologies that we need. We have been degrading land everywhere in the world. Climate change is making that even worse. 30% of China suffered a major drought last year, one of the worst they've ever had. We didn't really even hear about that, right? There are places all over the planet that are experiencing unprecedented climate problems, and that is going to test our agricultural systems in very significant ways. That's going to require us to really take the best of science, but also the best of indigenous wisdom, the best of circular thinking, the best of this of the regenerative approach to restructuring and rebuilding the way we grow our food.
So I'm going to quote you again. Next time DevEx calls, you might want to be careful so you get quoted on stage. Development works only when it actually builds the capacity of people to make decisions for themselves, and that it cannot just be a delivery of products and services to underserved populations. You talked about listening to indigenous communities. I think we all recognize the importance of locally led solutions. So can you talk a little bit more about that statement and how you think we can get closer to that in reality?
Yeah, the whole area of participatory development has been around for 50 plus years. The reality, though, is that we still are not doing it very well. We still don't listen extremely well. And I'm speaking as a donor. We sit in our conference rooms and design programs without the kind of feedback systems and the processes that are needed to really listen and adapt and have rapid feedback. And I think that's one of the problems with, donors give money to NGOs who then work for, who are working for their constituents, but the beneficiaries, the NGOs at the end of the day are accountable to the donors and not necessarily to the constituents. And we need to change that feedback loop. I think there's also human dignity is such an important thing, and we need to really value that, to see people as assets, not as people with deficits. When we create processes that really value people, value their insights, value the resources they bring, poverty comes in many different forms, wealth comes in many different forms, and it's not necessarily correlated with simple economics. And I think we need, the strongest, most vibrant communities are communities that have extraordinary social capital. And those are the communities that are going to succeed. So building that social capital, which is the end of the day about creating bonds of love, friendship, community, connection, is critical, and any development process needs to build that capacity.
So in our last minute here, you've devoted your career to ending hunger. Obviously, it might be a bleak career where you're constantly having disappointments. But what gives you hope? There are challenges, but I'm actually still very hopeful for a number of reasons. By the way, it was interesting when I love technology. It didn't mean to say that technology is not important. It's absolutely critical. I'm an MIT guy. When I was graduating from my undergrad there, I was going to. I decided to go to Cornell to do agricultural engineering, and my MIT advisor said, "Why are you wasting a brilliant career on agriculture?" And I think it's a fundamental flaw in the way we think. I think food and agriculture is the basis of a prosperous civilization, and we have to shift that. And I think what gives me hope is these thousands of groups out there that are imagining and envisioning, and the closer you get to the ground, the more extraordinary and more hopeful I get. All right. Well, thank you, Roy.
And it's at the end of the day, it's about love, not wishy-washy love, but it's about love that is a fierce connection to humanity.
Right. Well, I think that's a great note to end on. So thank you
Great.
for sharing with us today.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Where's the energy? We need energy to fight this. Are you ready to launch this today program? Yes? Good. Besides the information that, please take a seat. Besides the information that is going to be valuable from our panelists, I would like us to leave remembering probably one number, 820. 820 million people fight hunger every day. And that's 1 in 9 person on earth today that they are struggling with this. So it's really an important fight, and how better to find sustainable solution rather than working together. So today, to launch this today event together against hunger begins with a session about coming together. Let's reflect on what has been done and what can we do for the future. No one group or one entity or one organization can work or be capable to eliminate hunger. And we know that achieving the Sustainable Development Goal 2 or SD2, we need to work together in new ways. So true collaboration is often blocked or obstructed, unfortunately, by either competition or by conflict of interest by different entities and different organizations. And according to the DEFEX report, zeroing in on ending hunger, is 65% of respondents believe that programs should be in a way designed for long-term results and include a transfer of ownership to local communities. And probably Reverend Yilma would know better about that, and we'll discuss that with him. Let me please welcome everyone and introduce our amazing group of panelists today. Gloria Steele, Chief Operating Officer for CARE USA, which is a humanitarian agency delivering emergency relief and long-term development. Ms. Steele was appointed by President Joe Biden on January 20th in 2021 to serve as acting administrator of the U.S. Agency of Development, or USAID, until the end of April 2021. From 2021 to 2005, she served as Senior Deputy Assistant Administrator of USAID Bureau for Europe and Eurasia. Ms. Marielle Thete, Director of U.S. Government Relations in the North America Advocacy Department at the One Campaign. She leverages her bipartisan and broad U.S. government relationships and ties to the African continent to influence U.S.-Africa policy and engage thought leaders and African leaders, particularly on agriculture, food security, and nutrition and education. Reverend Gobezayehu Getachew Yilma, he's the Director and Vicar General of the Meki Catholic Secretariat in Ethiopia. As a Director of Caritas, he plans, directs, coordinates, and supervises social and development projects that help the most vulnerable by delivering quality education, providing health facilities for women and girls that are vulnerable, and in terms of strengthening their socioeconomic capabilities to reach for their potential, and implementing food security programs for the rural, poor areas. Welcome, everyone. We are going to kick this session with one common question for everyone. Have your organization, Ms. Gloria, worked to build bridges, to fight together against hunger? And was there, or did you feel that there was true collaboration? Please tell us how it's going.
Thank you, Joe, and I'm so pleased to be here this morning. We at CARE, and I think our previous speaker spoke to this too, know that no single entity, no single organization, no single sector, private or public, can do it alone. What is important are partnerships, and local partnerships are particularly important for us at CARE. And a study of our impact last year showed that our biggest and most endurable impacts have been accomplished through local partnerships. These are with civil society, with communities, with the governments, both local and national, that we work with, and the local private sector. It is important to work with them. We talked about locally led development because they know the problems and they have to own the problems and the solutions. So it is important to collaborate with them in order to achieve sustainability. That's what we learned. At the same time, we also know that we have to work globally. We work with international governments, bilateral donors, foundations, etc., to leverage each other's resources. And that's what we've learned. In order to accomplish what we need to accomplish, we need partnerships. True collaboration and true partnership. True collaboration comes from real partnerships. Just a last word, CARE is in 100 countries around the world, and this has enabled us to develop the trusting relationships with the local organizations and governments, which has helped to contribute in our ability to collaborate effectively.
Thank you. Ms. Marielle, in One Campaign, the sole focus is hunger and to fight hunger. Were you able to find ways and new challenges to overcome them, to work better with other entities and other organizations? And how is that going?
Yeah, so I would say one was synonymous with collaboration. The One campaign is a campaigning organization focused on ending extreme poverty and preventable disease. We were founded by Bono, along with a coalition of humanitarian and advocacy organizations, including CARE and Mercy Corps, World Vision, and others, who came together and saw this need and gap for advocacy. And we're continuing to work in coalition. And along with that, at our core, what is designed to be nonpartisan? And that's true collaboration right there, because we're bringing people together from all walks of life, and that's a reflection of our supporters as well, including faith leaders and doctors, all coming together to bring awareness to policymakers and communities on all these issues.
Thank you. Reverend Yilma, Caritas is known worldwide. In your local community in Ethiopia, how is it hard and what is needed for better collaboration with other entities?
Thank you, Joe. Well, I think collaboration is emanating from the very fundamental principles that faith-based organizations are standing for, which is forming the human person in the image and likeness of God, and which is fundamentally important. That any less to that is something that we have to work on. And our organization, particularly Caritas Meki, is somehow led by the integral human development approach, working on education, agriculture, water and sanitation, or any need that the community is facing at the moment in our implementation area, emanating from the challenges of conflict, climate change, or even pandemics that are happening now and then, or any cost of livings that are soaring, affecting the poor in the community. And that is a driving force for us to kind of put hands together in order to make a difference. And one person cannot clap with one hand, and that's very important to always, within the community, within Caritas family, and also within the donor, cross donors have to bring synergy in order to make a difference. So that's how we see collaboration, and it's happening in truth.
Thank you, Reverend. And we would like to say hi to all our audience watching us virtually. Everyone can collaborate and tweet and post using the hashtag #ZeroHunger and together and hashtag Together Against Hunger. Gloria, back to you. Your experience, not just with CARE, but formally as well with the USG, how your whole entire experience working for this cause shaped how you work in collaboration with others?
Thank you. That's a really good question.
Thank you.
I've learned a lot through the years that I've worked in development and humanitarian assistance. One of the most important learnings is collaboration isn't just signing on a pledge or attending meetings. You have to work at it. You have to own the problems. You have to be committed to addressing them. You have to have an agreement on what the problems are and the way forward. And that's why the importance of participation of local organizations, for example. And then we have to learn to collaborate in a true spirit, not in a competitive spirit, but where we can leverage what the other parties bring to the table. And I think that that results in the whole being greater than the sum of the parts, and that's what true collaboration is. And that's what I've learned from doing that. And there were many learnings along the way. The role of the public sector that you brought up, they can foster collaboration by providing an enabling and a unifying environment for everyone else that works in it. So when the US government prioritizes combating climate change or fighting hunger or locally led development, it becomes a priority that they themselves put forward. and they're able to provide resources that those that are wanting to be involved, need to collaborate, are able to do so. And then they're able to work with the governments to address the enabling environment that need to be in place for the collaboration to actually come to fruition. Because a lot of the problems are due to weak governance. And addressing that is something that the public sector, the US government, can help to facilitate.
Thank you, Gloria. Marielle, 33% of Zeroing In on Hunger survey respondents complain of multilateral organizations' lack of integration into existing governmental systems and processes. So, and another 56%, that's another high number, believe that donors do not take a unified approach due to competing priorities, unfortunately. And 42% think NGOs and implementers are hindered by poor coordination and collaboration. So the question, how important it is that organizations can work together within your organization's one campaign, how are you rethinking how you work together?
Yeah, so one thing that we emphasize is, obviously we're not an implementing organization. We were essentially formed for advocacy and bringing awareness. And so whether it's pulling in narratives and drawing from stories and anecdotes of our partners who are implementers, that's really important, and making sure that those stories are available and accessible to people to understand the issues to the core. You know, that we were having conversations as a community about localizing programs and aid and being intentional about that. And so continuing to push for it. I think in terms of, you know, this accountability or partnerships, here's an example of an organization that does this well, where they have a TRIPS program that brings policymakers to the ground, US policymakers and staff members, to see the impact of US foreign assistance. So that accessibility is very important.
Thank you. Reverend Caritas Meki, as we mentioned earlier, worldwide is known, and it has a deep belief in collaboration within the communities. But has it always felt welcome? That's one. And some have noted that international organizations, even donors, often give collaboration lip service or express approval or support, but without taking any significant action. What is needed, in your opinion, to foster that sense of true collaboration across sectors?
Thank you. I think, well, we all agree that collaboration is fundamentally important to make a difference in the lives of those poor or to finish hunger. But practically, many things are really are not coming together in such a way that we want them to make a difference in the lives of those poor people we serve. My experience working on the ground, I think, especially working with Catholic Relief Service, implementing projects from food assistance to non-food assistance in terms of agriculture or nutrition programs, we have always considered the layering and sequencing of activities, you know, in one particular community, even somehow inviting also donors, inter-donors connections that we have created. But for projects we have implemented on rehabilitation and also building infrastructures for the community, schools, health centers, we introduced with other donor support some ideas of, let's say, cooperatives. And the cooperatives are coming together to form union, and then the union is somehow having a strength, a local strength, in order to also support the farmers. And that capacity building is fundamentally important in order to carry on, continue in collaboration within homegrown capacities. And currently, we have introduced clustering, cluster farming, for example, using the cooperatives. And believe it or not, the Ethiopian government now is emulating these learnings. And then now in the rest of the country, we are promoting also agriculture with cluster farming. And this is making a huge difference. That's just from rehabilitation. Okay, you wouldn't know when they would be passing from rehabilitation projects to the next one to a cooperative, but you have to consistently believe in the layering and sequencing of activities so that you can follow up, the difference that you're making in the ground.
Thank you, Reverend. We still have less than 4 minutes for this panel. We're going to make the best out of it. Gloria, working together not only to provide food, but to provide healthy food for little kids. Michelle Obama, the former First Lady, worked toward that. Do you think, what do we need today, not only to provide food for everyone, because there were so many initiatives providing not really healthy food for vulnerable people who are in need. What do we need today to focus on making healthy food accessible through working together?
I thought we'd never get there, because I think we're not just looking to fight hunger, but to make sure that the nutrition, the health components make it right. At CARE, we center gender equality in all the work that we do. We focus particularly in ensuring that women and girls are involved in the work that we do, because our studies have shown that gender and hunger are intrinsically linked. In 109 countries, we saw this linkage.
Intersectionality.
Yeah, the intersectionality. And when women are hungry, when they are malnourished, we know that they're the providers of household food, and when they're hungry and malnourished, they're not able to take care of the health of the family as well. And so we need to make sure that as we address hunger, we include gender equality in it, so that the issue, the important matter of nutrition, is taken into account.
Thank you. Marielle, many have said that a movement to end hunger is impossible. In the 1980s, when we began the fight to end AIDS, many thought the same, that's going to be impossible. But today, we have great success in the fight against AIDS. Are there any lessons to be learned from that? And how is the AIDS movement different from the movement to end hunger?
Okay, I'll try to do this in 45 seconds here. So the key thing I'd say, first, the AIDS disease is traceable, and I think when we look at hunger and poverty, there are so many aftershocks and drivers, from gender inequality to extreme weather and climate, to conflict and displacement. The list goes on, right? They're in times reinforcing one another, so big distinction there. Putting it on the successes, education was key, and there was a lot of activism from ordinary people. And it also, we didn't really pay attention to it in the US until we saw it here, and even then, it took about 20 years to get PEPFAR and the Global Fund. So time, and then education, contextualized education, and ensuring that resources are locally available. Like we have health clinics. And so food is cultural, food is contextual, and making sure that those programs reflect those needs.
Thank you. Reverend, the last question, what are the unique needs and challenges to your local community, and how we can learn from that and apply it to other communities, you think?
Well, I think one very important thing I noticed in the attempt to alleviate hunger or make a difference in the lives of the poor community is how much are we really prepared to empower the local leadership in terms of leading whatever effort, whatever initiative that we are introducing. NGOs, international organizations are all like working for the same reason, for the same goal. But at the end of the day, whenever there are like challenges, like the pandemic that we have really faced recently, when expats were just asked to leave the country and all of that, the local leaders like myself, very close to the community, have been closely continuing whatever efforts and initiatives we have built on there in order to not to be reversed, in that arrangement. I think that kind of approach has to be replicated to other areas, other villages, other places where local leadership is empowered so that they can be taking the lead in order to make a difference and alleviate poverty.
Reverend Yilma, thank you. Gloria and Marielle, thank you for being with us. Thank you for watching. The last thing to reflect on for our audience on watching us virtually, Tupac Shakur said they got money for wars but can't feed the poor. For our audience, please use the chat box to reflect on that and give us your opinions about that quote. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm very happy to be back on stage with Isabel Coleman, Deputy Administrator for Policy and Programming at USAID. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So these next 2 days are about bringing together all of the actors that are working on global hunger, really to spark a social movement, to take advantage of this galvanizing moment. Actually, last month at UNGA, I believe you spoke about how this is a real galvanizing moment to bring the world together to fight against global hunger, given such the depth of the crisis. So as you think about that and your role within USAID, how are you thinking about seizing this moment to actually really make more progress on combating hunger?
Thank you. Thank you so much, and thank you for having me here. Food security and addressing hunger is such an important issue personally to me, and I know to Administrator Power too. And USAID has been on the front lines of trying to address food security issues for many, many years. And after the last food crisis, when we stood up Feed the Future, I think we saw some very promising signs of progress. Real investments in food systems to help countries be more resilient and more secure in terms of being able to produce their own food. Of course, in the last several years, we've seen a confluence of events that have shocked the system. Climate change, which isn't new, but is, I think, accelerating in some respects and in some particularly vulnerable areas of the world. Whether it's drought or extreme flooding, we're seeing both. We're also seeing the hangover effects, certainly of COVID, when supply chains were disrupted and farmers weren't able to do a lot of their planting, and everything sort of slowed down and got frozen in some places. And then, of course, Russia's terrible invasion of Ukraine, which has spiked food prices globally, but really also energy prices and fertilizer prices, and you've seen this whole confluence of events that I think has created this galvanizing moment when people realize that so much more still needs to be done in strengthening food systems globally and making sure that people have enough to eat. I mean, the reality is that there's still many, many millions of people who go to bed hungry every night, and that number is growing. And we've seen conflict, not just in Russia's invasion of Ukraine, but conflict in many countries around the world exacerbate food insecurity. So all over the place. We're seeing it, and it is, I think, a moment to take stock and redouble our efforts to improve agricultural productivity and resilience for food security.
And so how are you thinking about that at USAID and your programming and addressing climate disruption, conflict? How is that shifting the way you approach hunger?
Well, we're thinking about it in a number of different ways. Certainly in the short term, making sure that we have sufficient resources to address the severe humanitarian crises. I mean, we've programmed over $1 billion just alone for the Horn of Africa, where you see famine conditions underway. So in the short term, we recognize that we have to address the immediate needs of people facing the most severe acute malnutrition and famine conditions. At UNGA, we also announced over $500 million for unprecedented investment in RUTF, ready-to-use therapeutic food, in partnership with UNICEF and others, and bringing together private philanthropy, governments, multilateral organizations on RUTF. So there's the humanitarian side, addressing the immediate crises, but then, as we've always done, looking at the medium and the longer term. In the medium term, we've been relying on various different analyses to help guide our programming. IFPRI has done some interesting work indicating that the real levers to help resiliency for smallholder farmers, let's not forget that 30% of the world's food is produced by smallholder farmers, and that the real sort of leverage points are fertilizer efficiency and also cash transfers. So we're looking very much at investing more in social safety nets and also providing more access to the most vulnerable farmers for fertilizer. Just as an example, we've done a partnership with Yara, which is the Norwegian fertilizer company in Ghana, to provide 100,000 farmers in Ghana with access to fertilizer. We're in the medium term, making sure that farmers have the inputs they need to plant for the next season so that we can not see this replicated next year and the year after, and also cash transfers as a social safety net. That's medium term. Longer term, to continue to make the investments in the inputs that farmers need, the tech, the financing, the connections to markets, all of those components, storage, addressing the after harvest waste issue, which is so profound in so many places. So looking at that whole chain and system, Feed the Future over the past decade since it started has enabled $2.5 billion of private sector investment in the ag sector in the countries where we work, has leveraged $5 billion of financing and helped generate more than $20 billion of sales by farmers in the ag sector. So really helping to turbocharge all of these efforts going forward over the longer term to build resiliency. And then the last thing I'll say on this is really integrating the climate work that we're doing with our ag work, because more and more we do see the interconnections of that, both institutionally meshing that up much more closely and really aligning our programming between our climate programming and our ag programming.
So I want to touch more on the private sector engagement, and you have a lot of experience in this. And so there's a role for big food, big ag to play. In many cases, they are a huge part of the food system. But there can be, I guess, maybe a little bit of controversy around how to work with those groups. In many ways, they can be contributors to a lot of the challenges we're trying to solve. Obviously, the motivations can be different and the values, but how do you see working with particularly big food, big ag, and helping to solve the food system challenges?
Well, I think we both know there's a lot of controversy in ag writ large. It's a space where people have strong views on lots of different things. But at USAID, we definitely believe in science and technology and leveraging what we can to help increase productivity and enable more people to not go to bed hungry at night. You know, in the private sector work that we've been doing, a lot of it is very local. It's really trying to work with local markets so that ultimately that smallholder farmers are able to grow food, use it for their own consumption, but sell it. You know, one of the things we know is that investments in agricultural growth deliver twice the bang for the buck in reducing poverty than investments in other sectors. And private sector is incredibly important in that. You have to have the market systems available in these local economies so that farmers can be buying the seeds and inputs that they need, and through the whole process, leveraging, you know, technology. It could be simple having, you know, cell phone access so that they can check market prices and things. I mean, one of the things that we've been delivering has been a new tech app that we've been working with some of our other government partners using geospatial data on soil conditions, because farmers use fertilizer, it's very expensive, and they don't always know what their soil conditions are, and so they use it inefficiently. And providing them with very specialized data on what their soil is and what fertilizer they should be using allows them to use less fertilizer and increase their productivity. So there's a tech component, there's a distribution component, there's market, there's after sales, there are all sorts of things that private sector has to be involved in.
So I mentioned this in an earlier session, but we released a report with Action Against Hunger that was looking into some of the causes that practitioners believe contribute to the challenge of fixing hunger. And one of them that was cited was just the whole system of bidding for grants and contracts, whether it's with USAID or other donors, really breeds an environment of competition versus cooperation. And I believe many people here in this room and joining online probably work for a USAID partner, maybe are frenemies with some of the people here in the room. So I'd love to hear your thought on the role of USAID and donors in helping to facilitate cooperation rather than competition or duplication of effort.
Well, that's a really good question, and there's no silver bullet to this answer here, because you're right. When there's a fixed amount of money, people are going to be bidding for it, and there will be competition. Let's not sugarcoat that. But we really go to great lengths to try to make sure that there's not duplication of efforts, that we are coordinating with other partners, other donors. You're doing that, okay, we'll be doing this. And really looking to fill gaps. On the fertilizer space, as I've mentioned earlier, I mean, there are many different players working in this space. I am on calls regularly, understanding what they're doing and what types of interventions, what they're covering. We sometimes co-invest to make sure that we're really being able to get the most leverage out of the work that we're doing. It's not perfect. Is there some duplication of effort? Sure. There's, inevitably when you're, look, my portfolio is global, around the world. Are we certain that there's no duplication of effort? No, but we do put in place as many different efforts as we can to make sure that we're not doing that.
And you just recently got back from Niger and Côte d'Ivoire and on the ground, I think maybe a couple of days ago. So briefly in our last minutes, can you talk a little bit about what that experience and how it underscores your points today?
It is like in action, seeing everything that we're talking about on the ground. It's Niger has the fastest growing population in the world. It's experiencing drought. It's experiencing conflict. I went out to Maradi in the south to look at efforts that we're making to restore grasslands. Conflict is driven, between competition for land between herders and farmers, and it's everything right there. And you know, the earlier panel mentioned one of the elements of hunger being gender disparities. It's right there. You know, women have less access to all sorts of inputs and technology and land rights. It all comes together, and you know, it's a complex crisis that requires a complex solution.
All right, well, thank you. We'll be continuing discussing those solutions over the next couple days, but thank you, Deputy Administrator Coleman, for your time today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please return to Studio K at 10:35 a.m. for our next program.